So I finally finished my Ryzen workstation. It's right here, guys. It is working perfectly. However, there were a lot of little hurdles to overcome in order to get this thing working 100%. So today I'm going to talk about all the parts I selected, all the problems that I had to overcome, and also show you guys some 1440p gameplay footage with this rig and how well it performs, and also a little bit of the productivity side of things too. So let's get on with it. Welcome back, guys, and today I'm building my new Ryzen workstation, and this is all the parts here. A lot of these parts were sent in as either review samples or build samples, but I'm going to go through all the parts and what goodness they're going to do for this workstation. And the first here being the Ryzen R7 CPU. This one here is just absolutely amazing price performance for productivity. And since the productivity on this is going to beat that of my 6800K, it's going to be a pretty good upgrade. Now underneath that you have the GTX 1080 Ti, currently the best gaming graphics card out there at the moment. Is just a beast of a card, performing really well on the benchmarks. And of course you get a lot of CUDA cores as well, which is always great for Adobe Premiere Pro. And then next up here we've got one of the best X370 motherboards out there, the ASRock Taichi. I actually haven't reviewed this yet, but I'm going to be reviewing it pretty soon after, of course, I do this build and run it through some more paces. And now we're moving on to storage, and first up here we've got the Corsair XTI Neutron. This is a 960 GB drive, and it is going to be the main OS drive, so there's going to be a lot of storage on there. Really cool. And then for the scratch drive, I'm using the MP500, really fast M.2 NVMe drive. Going to be great when I'm editing videos, really fast file transfers. And then I've got an interesting configuration going on here for my backup. We've got two Seagate Barracudas, 7200 drives. I'm going to give them another chance since a lot of people are telling me that Seagate are really good nowadays. So I'm going to be giving them a go on my main workstation here. We've got two of these. I'm going to put them in RAID 0 for 4 terabytes since they're both 3 terabyte drives. And then we're going to put 1 terabyte in RAID 1. So that essentially mirrors the drives, and so if one of these drives fails, you still got your really important files backed up on the other drive. And now moving on to memory, we've got 64 GB kit here, 4 16 gig sticks at 2666 megahertz. This is the Vengeance LED stuff, and now I need 64 gigabytes for editing in Premiere Pro at 4K. Some other people need less, but I find myself always needing 64 gigabytes nowadays with all the footage that I'm taking at 100 megabits per second. So this stuff is going to be really good for that. And now we're moving on to the cosmetics with this build, and it just wouldn't quite be a build without some dank RGB lighting from Corsair. So I've got the fans, the strips, and also got some black cables since this will be a predominantly black and white themed build. Now the good thing about the RGB lighting is that you can put it on a static color, and that's one thing that I really like about it. So if you can take this from the next build to the next build, you can always color coordinate your stuff, even though it does have that rainbow effect, which I kind of think sort of makes RGB a bit, well, people think it's a bit too much, but I love the static color that you can change it to anything you want at any time. That's my favorite thing about RGB, and this build is going to essentially be this turned into white, and then we've got the black cables for a really cool black and white theme build. And now we're moving on to the whole power plant essentially of this build, the HX1000i. This thing has 83.3 amps available on that 12 volt line. It's also got a 10-year warranty, which is huge. And the fans spin down when it's not drawing that much power, or your components aren't drawing that much power. Also, it's got ultra low noise, and it's a platinum rated power supply. So this thing is really efficient, and it's fully modular too. So damn, man, this thing has got it all. Now onto the cooler, we've got the Corsair H110i, which works with the AM4 platform out of the box. It's also got the Corsair Link software, and it's got two 140mm fans. So this thing is going to do a pretty good job of cooling. And with that said, let's move on now to the last component in this build. This is the Air 740. And now this is part of the Air series from Corsair, which is essentially a case series that splits your components into two. It's got two different cabinets, one which is dedicated to your power supply, cable management, and also your drives, and then another cabinet which is dedicated to your main components. And it's got a push-pull air configuration. So that's your CPU cooler, your motherboard, and your graphics card. Just get dedicated cooling, and man, I absolutely love it. And this is not just the 740, it's also their Air 540 and Air 240 series, and this is specifically why I requested the Air 740 from Corsair for this build, because I absolutely love this series of cases. But anyway guys, let's get on with the build now and just get an epic workstation ready for you guys. Alright, so we're on the last phase here of the build, and this is all the cable management. But man, it's taken a lot longer than a usual build, so I had to pull off the front panel, which actually has like 9 screws, so, and then you have to pull out the hard drive tray to get to that. So awesome build so far, except the cables are just a jungle here at the moment, and that's because we've got 3 extra controllers. Well, actually 4. I think we've got like 3 things for the LEDs. We've also got a fan controller here because we've got an additional amount of fans. We've also got 3 SATA drives, and they all require cables. So you can just see there's a mammoth amount of cables, and you've also got the 2 USB link controllers there for the HX1000i. So damn, a lot of cables here, but we're going to do our best to make this neat and tidy. So let's get, and another thing too, there was a shame about the 24 pin here. It's actually, with the HX1000, it needs another 4 cables or something, or the premium cable anyway. It's got too many cables, so it can't plug in, unfortunately, to the H1000i, which is a shame. So I can't use that cable. I'm going to have to contact Corsair to switch something up there and try and get a black extension in maybe, and then see what I can do with that. So now I booted up my computer before, and you probably may have noticed that the LED strips didn't turn on at all, and also the fans at the front didn't turn on either. And I'm actually glad I made these 2 little mistakes, because I got to figure out how it all works from the computer side of things. And this is the HD Node Pro here. This is essentially the unit that hooks into the USB 2, and you can control it via the software, and you control all the LED strips and also the fans at the front via this too. And essentially I plugged in a male-to-male connector at the start. This was only a 2-prong or a 2-pin unit, and this unit here controls the power too for your LED strips. So you have to make sure that you plug in the 3-pin male to female. I kind of wish they had the male to male there for more wiring convenience, but they didn't. But it still works. It works really well now. And also the front part here, I didn't realize that I had actually plugged this into 4, 5, 6 first when I needed to plug this into 1, 2, 3. And with that, when I started reading up about this, you can plug this male-to-male prong, you actually get 2 of them, you can plug this into the spare port here on the Node Pro and plug that directly into this unit here, so you now no longer need the manual unit, which I installed before. So I actually just pulled this out, and now I can control all my LEDs from the software itself in Windows, my front fans, and also the LED strips. So I've just set up the PC, and now I'm locking in the overclocks to make sure they're stable. I'm using IDA 64 for this, which I think is actually a really good stress tester for the Ryzen CPUs. I find the temperatures are pretty accurate, even though on that note with the temperatures, it looks like the CPU may be the socket temperatures as opposed to the package temperatures, which may be actually your core temperatures, even though AMD say these are running about 20 degrees overstated at the moment on the 1800X and the 1700X. I gotta look into this a little bit more. I may actually change this over to Thermal Grizzly too, instead of using the stock Corsair paste on the heatsink. And I'll also test that with the 7700K, so stay tuned for that video in the coming weeks. And also here we can see a 4.025 overclock here, completely stable, and the memory is looking really stable too, since IDA does test the memory too, and that's at 1.39 volt on the CPU and 1.3 volt I believe on the memory, and that's 64 gigabytes at 2933 megahertz. So now this is looking stable. I'm going to jump into some games with my overclocked GTX 1080 Ti on the Acceleron and see how that performs. The first benchmark I'm going to run through now is GTA 5, and I've got here the graphics settings, which are pretty much on very high across the board here. I have turned down MSA a little bit because I am on 1440p ultra-wide, and let's see how this thing performs on a mission in GTA 5. So I'm going to be driving through heaps of traffic, and I'm actually going to have Shadow Play on so you guys can have a look at the performance. And I mean, even with Shadow Play on, it's still getting around 100 frames per second, which is exactly where I want it with this monitor. So that's really cool that this thing can perform how I want it to perform And yeah, look at this. I mean, it's smooth as butter. It's playing fine. This is with a 1080 Ti, by the way, so the GPU is getting utilized quite heavy, as you can see. It's near 100%, and wow, this is pretty cool. Like, it's good that Ryzen can play even the CPU intensive games pretty well, not just the graphically intensive games. So here it is here, guys. I mean, I've been driving through a heap of different crowded areas and stuff like that. It's been just going over 100 frames per second the whole time I've been doing this. The 1080 Ti obviously is a great graphics card. This is killing it as well. But for those people who want to step up to higher resolutions with a high-end card like the 1080 Ti, then don't be scared, because this thing can definitely handle a 1080 Ti at 1440p ultra-wide, which I know is going to be a very popular monitor. So see here, I'm just playing this mission, and the frames are really good. So really enjoying it, smooth as butter. And we'll just move over to another couple of games here and show you guys how it performs. So one of the last titles we're going to look at here is Ghost Recon's Wildlands. This is one of the latest titles out there at the moment in the Tom Clancy series. It is very graphically intensive, so you know, you guys can see it's handling the game pretty well. I'm playing pretty terrible here, but let's reverse this thing off the mountain, see how we go. And you know, you're getting near around about like 100 or 90 frames per second, so it is looking pretty good. You know, I can't believe this truck just survived a big drop like that. I thought it was going to blow up, but yeah, like the title, the AMD CPU is handling this title absolutely fine. The GPU near 100% usage the whole time, and the CPU is just chilling. So I think when we compare this to the 7700K, even though I'm going to make a direct video versus it, the 7700K is of course going to edge it out in a lot of the modern day titles in FPS. But this CPU, if you look at the productivity scores, it's got so much more max potential in terms of a CPU than the 7700K. So it's kind of like when you're comparing these two CPUs with each other, it's kind of like one is sort of more relevant for gaming now, but the other is much more well-rounded and can do gaming perfectly fine. And then when you look at obviously the 6800K, this thing beats the 6800K in productivity, and it does pretty much the same in gaming. So that's really good to see AMD coming out with a just kick-ass price performance CPU. And now another thing too is with that is the Bulldozer. If we look at the Bulldozer CPU and compare that, like I tried the Bulldozer CPU and I remember comparing that even to like the 4670K at the time. It really wasn't a CPU that I would want to have as my main CPU. Like Bulldozer was just so far behind when it was released, and so the 4-core versus the 8-core, I would have rather have had a 4-core. Even to this date, if you gave me the two CPUs and said I could only have one of those CPUs, I'd still pick a 4690 or 4670K over an 8370 or an 8320. So that's just my opinion there. But Ryzen, man, I'd rather pick Ryzen any day of the week over a 7700K for what I'm doing. It's just that good of a CPU. And gaming is absolutely fine on this thing too, especially when you get to the higher resolutions. So let's move over now to a conclusion with this whole build. So there it is, guys. My Ryzen rig is finally complete. It's been running this benchmark in the background for a good 30 plus minutes, and I just can't be more impressed with not only the Ryzen R7 CPU, it's a fantastic CPU for productivity and gaming for someone looking for an all-rounder, unbelievable price performance, but also all the other parts as well. They're just kicking ass. You can probably just hear there's no noise creeping in. You actually might hear the washing machine, which is like off in yonder, being louder than this thing. And even my benchmark rig, which is just transferring files over at the moment and it's not doing anything in idle, is probably louder. So there's a quick noise test. And this thing is just performing like a complete workhorse. I can't recommend it enough to someone who just wants to go out there and build a really balanced system. I'll also be having another system coming to the channel where it'll be a really cookie cutter Ryzen build, so stay tuned for that. Someone who doesn't have the budget to build something like this, but also wants to get really good performance. And on that note of performance, the 1440p gaming is just really damn good. I'm loving what this brings to the table. And then of course there's the productivity. When I'm using this in Adobe Premiere Pro, it is just performing extremely well, better than my 6800K did, but keep in mind I did have better drives. So if you do want to do productivity and you do want to get better performance, it's not just the CPU. It will come down to also your drive configuration, so do keep that in mind. And of course the memory configuration. So I've got the 64 gigabytes of DDR4 memory running on all sticks at 2933 megahertz with that 1T command rate timing, so it's working really well at the moment. Though as I spoke about before with some of the little problems I had, like the LED controller and stuff like that, there were some other problems that I did come into in this build. The Elgato capture card, for example, would ironically enough not work on any of the PCIe mini slots, and those slots go through the chipset's PCIe controller and not the CPU. However, when I installed it on one of the two PCI Express 16 speed slots that connect directly to the CPU, that was when the capture card would start working. So I then contacted Elgato. They're telling me that they are working on fixing this problem. So if you do have a Ryzen system and you want to get your HD60 Pro working, then you will have to use it on one of the two PCI 16 speed slots that connect directly to the CPU. So it's kind of unfortunate if you do have two graphics cards that need those slots, then you'll have to probably put one of those graphics cards in the bottom slot that connects through the PCIe chipset controller for the meantime. And now I also did have a little problem with the Air 740, and although the performance is just phenomenal on this case, the back component doesn't have cooling directly for your hard drives. And since I am running two mechanical drives at 7200 RPM in RAID 0, I do want a cooling solution or active cooling on those drives. So going into my used price performance bin, I managed to pick out some random fan and just install it in there to give the drives direct cooling. And the performance is really cool. Now also another little thing that I did spend time on was the RAID configuration setup, and it's mainly because I just wasn't used to setting up RAID with an AMD controller. I haven't used it for a long time. So there is a little bit more hurdles to jump through there. You will have to download the latest RAID drivers from the website, load them on a USB stick, and then also when you're installing Windows, you'll have to load up the driver 4 times. Like that's once and then load it up again because another one will pop up. You'll have to do this 4 times if you want to install Windows on a driver in this configuration of RAID, even if it is a single hard drive that's not even going into a RAID configuration per se. And on that note, if you do want to put all your drives in the RAID configuration, you will have to create an array for every single drive, even if they're not being rated in RAID 10, 0, or 1. So just a little FYI there, hopefully it saves some of you guys time. And also some last minute things that I wanted to touch on with this build. I will be benchmarking it, comparing it to the 7700K again, since a lot of you guys want me to retest these benchmarks now that the Ryzen rig has some BIOS updates flowing through. The updates are coming through on Windows. Things are looking really good and they are performing really well. So I believe the updates have flown through right in time for Ryzen 5, which is what Wendell predicted, that the 8-core users will be more like the bench dummies. And that's exactly what's happening. And on that note, I should have some Ryzen R5 coverage coming to you guys very soon, so stay tuned for that. And on that note, I can recommend the Ryzen R7 CPUs as just all-round beast CPUs for productivity, gaming, and whatnot. They're incredible price performers. I absolutely love what AMD's done with the Ryzen lineup now that all the fixes have come about and the true performance is starting to be seen. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button and let me know what you think of the new workstation. What would have you done differently if you would do something differently? Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions as always, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye. For my hard drives, and since I've got two mechanical drives at 72,000 RPM, that's pretty fast.